Okay, let's talk about how much volume you should do. So we're gonna build upon a newsletter I wrote out and kind of add to this. Now there's probably at a later date going to be a little bit of a different one where it's a proper talking head, but for this one we're kind of, leveraging this to make it a bit easier for everyone. So first things first, we gotta change this color actually. First things first, volume recommendations are completely wrong. Yes, I know it sounds weird, and we're going to get to it, and in fact we're going to add on an additional thing onto this video because I think they go together very nicely. So I have spent years digging into literature, looking at what works. When you actually take a look at this, 10 sets per muscle per week is unrecoverable. It's something where if you do it, within 4 days, we still haven't removed a majority of the fatigue. And that's the fatigue that actually prevents you from getting those high threshold motor units, from being able to go right up to the top end of the pool and to be able to train muscle fibers that have a lot of potential to grow, which is a really important thing you want to do if you're trying to get big. So yeah, it's undoable. What this means is 10 sets is not just not part of our range, it's actually the ceiling. It's something we shouldn't go above. And because we don't have too much information exploring under 10 sets and seeing how we can recover from that, all we know is that it's the ceiling, really. Although the next thing will build upon that a bit. Let me get rid of this bar as well. I don't like it. Okay, so yeah, quick thing to add on to it. Volume doesn't include reps, but trust me on the 4 to 6 rep range. This is something where there's probably going to be a video on it, something separate, but the 4 to 6 rep range is the perfect sort of golden area to minimize that fatigue but maximize the stimulus you can get from it. Okay, now I've made a little model here, a little graph, and this kind of demonstrates the two sides of the coin. So here we have the common belief. We've got 8 sets here. If we're going from set 1 to set 2, we're only doing 2 sets, well, that's 50% more units of growth. Is that even true? I think it's more like 100%. That doesn't matter. For the argument's sake, it doesn't matter. I think I was more so trying to demonstrate that set 1 and set 2, this is 50% the growth, and we're adding, and yeah, it wasn't, it could be done better. We're going to ignore that for argument's sake. But now we've got the rest of the sets, and then if we go from set 7 to set 8, we're only really getting 14% more of these growth units. This sort of model is what people believe, and it works on the interpretation that every set has a unit of growth, just one unit of growth, which means the later ones offer diminishing returns, and they're less important because although they give the same amount of units of growth, it's less compared to the total pool of growth that already exists, as there are so many growth units already. That is not true though. This is the truth. As you can see, we've got set 1 here, got set 2, and as we're adding these additional sets, we're getting this sort of shaded black area. And what this means is we're not getting a full unit of growth. This is our unit of growth down here. And these ones have some black because we're not getting 100% of the growth we would from set 1. We're getting maybe 2/3, maybe a quarter, or whatever this is. Maybe it's a third, maybe a quarter, maybe a sixth, maybe a tenth. And then set 7 and 8, maybe there is a teeny tiny red dot there. I don't really know. Maybe there's nothing. So the first set does give 1 unit of growth, but the later ones give less units of growth. And then, yeah, growth caps around the 6 sets mark. Awesome. So that's our model. So to understand volume, we have to understand the true diminishing returns per muscle, per workout, or per week, however you want to view it. But per week is a little bit different because truthfully, if we're going to split it frequency wise, we're going to almost restart this cycle of having effective sets rather than having maybe, let's say we're doing 3 sets on Monday and on Friday we do another 3 sets. It wouldn't be sets 4 to 6. It'd probably be something like sets 1 or 1 to 3, replicating that sort of diminishing return. Okay, so yeah, you've probably seen completely everywhere on YouTube inconsistent volume advice. Some people talk about how a muscle can grow best from 1 set, others talk about needing more than 10, and then stuff has gone up to 52 sets a week benefiting. I've even seen a in-depth video from a doctor, or I think 2 doctors, talking about how even going up to 400 is still offering benefits. Yes, I do feel bad for you, because in truth, this sort of training is not one that's conducive of growth. It's conducive of, honestly, a detriment to growth. And in most cases too, and we'll discuss that in the kind of built upon this sort of newsletter explanation, we're really getting into an area where we're looking at inflammation and edema in the muscle, which is just swelling and water, instead of actually seeing additional contractile units being added. Anyway, I will admit, I'll give this one, the amount of sets that someone needs is individual. There is a level of individuality to it, but the range is not 1 to 50. The range we're actually seeing is something more like 4 to 8. And the reason this is because everyone I'm talking to, everyone who's watching the video, you are human. Now again, this is an assumption, because you might not be a human, you might be someone's guinea pig in the background, or a cat or a dog, I don't really know. But so long as you actually are human, you're a part of our species. And if you're a part of our species, then we've all evolved together to be one with really similar muscle growth genetics. And because of this, the odds of someone needing less than 4 or more than 8 literally ends up being, 1 in 10 million. And we're getting even further when we go into maybe needing 1 set or somehow needing 50 sets. It's just not happening. So the odds of getting to that, the standard deviations away from the mean, which just means every single time we go this way, it's an even less percentage possible of going away from this middle. The odds of getting there would require DNA which is so different to the average that you would not be human. So, you have probably, definitely, well, yes, you've most definitely heard countless of creators saying they respond to high volume. And these might even not be the science guys, these might be more of the, I'm just documenting my process, giving tips, talking about how I feel, and they don't. These guys usually think they do. And I've seen a few come out and talk about the truth of their observations. See, these people, if you go back to their peak cut, peak bulk, whatever, they end up looking the same, having the same strength. Throughout this journey, it's going up and down. They notice more muscle, they notice less muscle, but there's no real overall strength gain. They're just going from one place to another, and things are changing along the way. And this is something which is demonstrated really, really heavily. If you do something as simple as gain a little bit of fat or lose a little bit of fat, exercises like the bench press, we've got this bigger chest, this bigger back, we're storing more carbs, we're storing more fat around this area, and it's easier. We haven't even gained any muscle, and just from that change, we're now able to add a few kilos on quite significantly. A lot of people don't even understand how this works, or they might not even understand or believe it, but then you have to understand too. I'm saying understand a lot, I'm aware of that. Some people will do something called unequipped lifting, which basically means you're not allowed to use equipment that helps you. But one of the things that is allowed is knee wraps. Knee sleeves. Now, knee sleeves are allowed because they don't really offer too much of a benefit. But anyone who has worn a knee sleeve will know that tiny bit of fabric, the extra sort of difference, the cushioning it gives you when you go down, allows you to push off of yourself and have like a softer landing and get a bigger lift. Even if it's marginal, these tiny differences do end up adding up. But yeah, I'm one of these guys. I'm guilty of this myself. I used to have the belief that I had a high work capacity. No, I just didn't understand what I was doing. This is a genuine workout I used to follow. 4 sets of lat pull down, 6 of the bent over 1 armed row, and this would have actually been 12 sets because I would log each one as the same and match the reps. 3 sets of the close grip lat pull down, 3 sets of the close grip row, 6 sets of the 1 arm seated, again that would have been 12 sets, 4 sets of cable pullovers. Oh gosh, I'm not even going to read the rest, it's too disappointing. We're all back there used to do. But yeah, I did not have a high work capacity. I was not training hard. I was not subscribing to Future Poole Fitness. I was building a lot of fatigue. I was weaker than a 70-year-old I'm a 70-year-old bingo playing grandma. When I first made this newsletter, I used to sneak in stuff like that. It doesn't exist anymore. I don't know why I had a grandma obsession back then. That sounds weird. It's not what you think. But adding on to this, so all of the sets you perform should be around this sort of 0 to 1 reps before failure mark, because I do not want you to waste your time. I'm someone who's wasted months of my life where I'm regularly going to the gym, I'm regularly staying on top of my nutrition, on top of my sleep, spending money on supplements, and yet getting minimal progress. And when you're starting out, the novel stimulus you're getting, the fact that you have a lot of potential for growth, it might mean you're strong enough to handle all this fatigue, but you're handling all of this in a way where it's not that you're growing in spite of the fatigue. You're growing less still, you're just growing a ton because you're new. And inevitably, at the end of the day, you shouldn't have to do this. You should be able to grow as much as possible from day one. So this is an equation that I want on a t-shirt, and it's been a while since I wrote this. I still don't have it on a t-shirt. That will come one day. But gains equals stimulus minus fatigue. This is also known as like net stimulus. And you only grow when this net stimulus is positive. And I want to talk about growth. I'm not talking about adding water to the muscle. I'm talking purely we're making the muscle stronger. We're adding contractile units. But this is where volume gets complex. See, earlier on, I was explaining how maxing out the stimulus is around 6 sets. And if we want to max out this stimulus, we do 6 sets. But fatigue exists. This comes in. Not all sets are really weighted the same. And this is why we have to view the equation weekly, because it doesn't matter how much stimulus the initial workout gives, across the week, how are things adding up? So, to put it simply, a muscle is either going to be growing or dying, getting bigger or shrinking. And a stimulus from a workout will last for about 3 days. Past then, the muscle is dying, it's shrinking. So ideally what you want to do from an optimizing perspective, it doesn't mean you have to do this, but if we're going to get the best approach, ideally we want to hit this at least twice a week to keep that net stimulus as high as possible. And in order to do this, you need to make sure that fatigue isn't high the second time you hit that muscle. So this adds a different perspective, a new thing we have to worry about, and it has a few variables. So honestly, it's something you have to determine yourself, because everyone has different equipment, everyone has different preferences in the exercise they enjoy, but you have to work out how you're going to split it. And the criteria that's kind of involved is how lengthened the exercise is, whether we're working one side or both sides, or unilaterally, bilaterally, at the same time, not at the same time. Are we doing this a certain amount of times a week? How stable is this exercise? What's the rep range? How close to failure are we training? And this is not an exact science, but I put together what I believe to be is a table which determines relative sets each exercise would have based on fatigue, not on stimulus. None of this has anything to do with stimulus. It's only a model to describe how the fatigue is going to change. So the first variable is kind of like the position one. Is it the mid-range? Is it the lengthened range? Where is it hardest? And you can see how these are adding different multipliers. And you can screenshot this if you'd like and have it added to your phone. You can crop it, make sure you have that saved. Are we working each side individually? That is going to add more fatigue. If it's lengthened, it's going to add more fatigue. Is it free weight? I consider this less fatigue because in truth, we're not going to get the same amount of damage we're going to get from a stabler exercise. And when we leave the room and we've recovered from the workout, what we're mainly recovering from is perceptions of effort. That is the fatigue we get in the workout itself. But the real thing that starts fatiguing us outside of that is muscle damage. Muscle damage essentially will send feedback to the body and say, yo, we're really fatigued. That means if an exercise is free weight and we're targeting less muscle fibers and we're causing less muscle damage, there will be less fatigue from it. Even if in the moment it feels more difficult because there's other things we have to do and you'd think that it'd be more fatiguing. It's not. But yeah, then we've also got reps, more damage, training to failure, more damage, more fatigue, proximity to failure. If we're having, maybe 2 RR instead of 1, we can consider that less. And yeah, this is not a perfect system. I'll continue working on this and iterating it. And I have in my head been thinking about ways we can change this. I just haven't put out an updated version because I think this is as close as we're going to get for now. But here's a demo on the application with single arm cable machine preacher cows. Got to be specific. Reason being, these preacher cows would be working in the shortened range. When we've got our arm up like that, it's going to shorten the bicep, and it's not a lengthened, a more lengthened range. However, it does end up being the hardest in the lengthened position, because roughly when it's at the bottom, especially on the machines you're going to see, that is where our bicep's going to be the weakest. And because of how the machine works, it's going to have constant tension, constant force the entire time. So where the bicep is the weakest is also where it's going to be hardest. A little bit confusing to understand, but I hope that makes sense. If the bicep was strongest at the bottom, and it was weakest at the top, it would be hardest at the top. This is a bit weird, but something you can use to understand how that works is you can just do the movement and see where it feels most difficult. But because we're doing this single one at a time, each side is individually worked. So we're going to add on the fatigue multiplier for that, fatigue multiplier for lengthened, fatigue multiplier for shortened, and then it's a machine or cable. It's stable. That's going to be just one. We're working in this rep range, and we're working this RAR. We multiply these all together, we get almost 2 relative sets. So what this means is when we're programming this in, if this is the only movement for biceps, we're going to have about 3 sets, and we can split this however we want. Attached to that, if a muscle isn't worked, so let's say we were loading the forearms a little bit potentially, or it was a pull down, we might consider that to work the biceps. And if that's the case, we're just going to throw 1 set of fatigue onto that, because it's still going to fatigue the area. So this is the awesome thing. The process allows really quick progress, because when you're following volume that's recoverable, your strength ends up skyrocketing. You start packing on the progressive overload, packing on some easy wins with the muscle, and oh my gosh, how did I write this? Your new worries involve buying jeans that fit. I guess that's true, but thankfully it's easy to follow the checklist and work out how about you're going to divide the volume, because you just go boom boom, done it. And anyone who's in my coaching group, Deep End, when they end up switching this, they end up getting shocked, because it really is crazy how much you end up skyrocketing the strength when fatigue is removed. Now, past this point, progress is good, plates get added, reps get added. It's not as quick as the time when you're removing that fatigue, but it's still more significant than when you were training before. And managing that sort of progress is the most important. I don't know what I was doing here. Most important thing when it comes to earning stretch marks. So, the step system. You got to find the right volume. Count muscle has worked. If it's not primary, we're still giving it a set. We've got to use that checklist to work out the relative volume so we can maximize that net stimulus. We can't go above 10 relative sets a week, and we need to train a muscle 2 times a week minimum, and then grow is the last thing. Bit of an eye roll. So this is kind of a little bit of jargon, very passionate, very outspoken. There's a lot of drama about this. You can send me an email. You can find my email by signing up to the newsletter, but this is more. There is a building on top of this. We're built on it. So this is almost a follow-up to the other email, newsletter, article, whatever you want to call it. For people who are following this for a while, they would have understood my sort of recommendations when it comes to actual sets, removing the whole relative fatigue thing. When it comes to pure sets, it's probably going to be in the range of 4 to 6 per muscle per week. And this is me talking about how there's a study that came around which proved I'm wrong, because if we open this study up and we take a look and we scroll down to the chart that talks about effective volume, we see where are we going? It's a long scroll. So we see this. And if we look at the muscle group 1, we can see it keeps continuing up and up and up, all the way up to literally past 40, still consistently. So this study proves I'm wrong, obviously. Muscle growth keeps going up past 30. Muscle growth never slows down, and how could I be wrong? There is a problem with this. See, the newsletter I sent someone yesterday, which is some stuff about how people can't read studies, explains why people can't read studies. And that ends up being, we have to go into digging into another newsletter, into another rabbit hole, but the study doesn't show muscle growth continuing past 4 to 6 sets, even though you see this rubbish. It doesn't disprove the stuff I'm claiming, the stuff I'm saying, and it does prove something that has been on my mind for a while. The studies don't make sense. The studies that explore hypertrophy don't make sense. And I'm going to show people why. And I'm going to show them using this chart. See, the important thing about this meta-analysis, which put together basically all the studies we have on training and muscle growth and talking about reps and, well, I don't think it talks about reps, talking about frequency and talking about volume. Let's see how many there were. So yeah, they literally like 67 studies on that. Here's what they did. These studies had the exact same training, and in the measurements they used to determine how effective the training was with hypertrophy-based style training, they did 2 measurements for the most part. They did hypertrophy measurements, which is usually muscle thickness. We're literally just taking like a cross-sectional area measurement of a muscle and going, it's this, it's grown, it's shrunk, or whatever. Or there's strength measurements. Strength measurements is working out how much force a muscle can output. And this is what we get. We get hypertrophy going all the way to the moon consistently, and we have strength, and it goes up here about 4 to 6, maxes out, and then doesn't go anywhere. Here's what's really interesting. If you're training in the exact same way, where you're doing hypertrophy-based training, you're doing the same sort of rep ranges, sets, well not sets, but rest times, weight progression, ways we're targeting muscles, the exercises we're doing themselves. If we're doing all this, and we're not doing a strength program which is focused on some of the strength-based adaptations where we're working on coordination, we're working on neuroadaptation, the only strength outcome, the only thing driving a strength outcome we can have is muscle growth, is hypertrophy. And what's so interesting about this is what we dig into. See, the hypertrophy and strength graphs should line up. Now, by no means are we saying it should be a 1-to-1 correlation, but they should be correlated. If hypertrophy is going up, strength needs to be going up too. And this is why I threw a little cheeky in my newsletter. If people were observant, then they might have noticed. How can someone build all that muscle without any strength? Now, when we're putting this simply, it's impossible to have no strength increase with a ton of muscle growth. And yet this hypertrophy chart keeps seeing it. It's not disappearing, it's not going down. If anything, it seems really, really steady, almost linear at this sort of point. Here's what this study tells us. It does tell us muscle growth maxes out at 4 to 6 sets per muscle per week. And the more important thing it tells us is that measurements of muscle growth, these muscle thickness measurements, have a huge weakness. These measurements cannot differentiate between swelling and growth. The hypertrophy studies are damage studies, because what we're seeing in training which involves a high level of muscle damage, a high level amount of inflammation, and we're seeing that grow. We're seeing the sizes go up because of non-contractile tissue addition. So, muscle damage does not cause growth. This is something that wants to be avoided. It's a byproduct. It's harmful. If anything, it's a detriment to our training. It's reducing our possible growth instead of increasing it. Following what the chart here would suggest, going to those 40 sets, it's not the right path. It would destroy the possible progress. Stick to the recommendation of 4 to 6 sets. This is what we're looking at here. This is the area we're working. There's no point doing any of this or any of that. It's not going to do anything. And then, as always, I sign out the videos. Your hypertrophy hero, Fletcher. If you want to sign up to the newsletter, if you want to grab this beginner workout program, feel free. Thank you for watching this video. Leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe. Do whatever you want, man. Have a good day.